Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode. Today we are talking about SIBO and weight gain. Why does it happen and what to do about it? So, did you know that people with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or SIBO may be at a higher risk for experiencing significant weight fluctuations, including unexpected weight gain? Research suggests that people with obesity may have up to 3 times the risk of developing SIBO compared to those without obesity, particularly in Western populations. Managing SIBO can be very complex. It can feel like a puzzle, especially regarding how it impacts your weight. And while many associate SIBO with weight loss, because a lot of people with SIBO have malabsorption or difficulty eating, digestive distress, weight gain is also surprisingly common. So in today's episode, we're going to explore why SIBO can lead to both weight gain and weight loss, dive into how different types of SIBO impact your body, and offer practical tips to help you manage your weight while treating SIBO. Whether you're struggling with unexpected weight changes or just want to understand how SIBO impacts your body, we are going to talk about all of it. So I'm also going to put in the show notes a download for my 7-day SIBO diet plan. This is designed to help you calm inflammation, ease your symptoms, get relief from your symptoms, and make sure you're eating the right foods to support your body, to get the nutrients you need, to have the energy you need, and to calm inflammation, especially if you're trying to lose weight while managing SIBO. Let's first of all talk about what is SIBO. SIBO stands for small intestine bacterial overgrowth, and it happens when bacteria that normally reside in the large intestine actually overgrow in the small intestine, disrupting the natural digestion and balance that's supposed to happen there. And it leads to really uncomfortable digestive symptoms, lots of your typical IBS symptoms, diarrhea, abdominal pain, sometimes constipation, bloating. It also hinders nutrient absorption because in our small intestine, that's where we absorb most of our nutrients. And when there's inflammation there from the SIBO, it decreases our nutrient absorption, which for some can result actually in subsequent weight gain. We'll talk a little bit more about that further in the episode. And while SIBO is often associated with weight loss because of that impaired nutrient absorption and difficulty eating, as I mentioned earlier, some people will experience weight gain. So it can go either way, and that can make it even more complex and difficult to figure out. There are various complex mechanisms by which SIBO can contribute to weight gain. And when you understand these mechanisms, it not only clarifies why some people with SIBO struggle with weight gain, but also helps us pinpoint effective solutions to address the issue and kickstart weight loss. So the first thing that happens is the nutrient malabsorption and increased appetite. SIBO, because it impairs the digestion and absorption of nutrients due to the overgrown bacteria, the bacteria actually interfere with the breakdown of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and this can lead to nutritional deficiencies. As the body tries to compensate for this, it can increase appetite, contributing to weight gain. So basically what that means is we're not getting the nutrients we need when we have SIBO because we're not absorbing them well and we're not breaking down the food well. And so our body tries to compensate, thinking, oh, we're not getting the nutrients, we need more food, increases your appetite and can contribute to weight gain. Another thing that happens is increased calorie absorption. So the excess bacteria in the small intestine, they actually ferment undigested fibers. And this produces something called short chain fatty acids, which are absorbed and converted into energy, leading to increased calorie absorption. This means that their fibers are components of food that normally would not be digested. So what happens when you have excess bacteria in the small intestine is they actually start to ferment those fibers. They produce short chain fatty acids, it means that you're getting more calories out of the same amount of food, which is just totally frustrating. So you have more opportunity to get calories from a component of food where you normally wouldn't get calories from, fiber. So another mechanism is insulin resistance. SIBO may be linked to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is where the body's cells become less responsive to insulin, and this makes it harder to use glucose for energy and can lead to higher blood sugar, which increases fat storage and contributes to weight gain. So elevated insulin levels from insulin resistance signal the body to store more fat, making weight loss more challenging. So SIBO can contribute to this. And then another mechanism is inflammation and metabolic disruptions. There's something called metabolic endotoxemia that occurs. I actually have an entire podcast episode on this, so I will actually link to that in the show notes. Metabolic endotoxemia happens when the bacteria in the small intestine release toxins that get into the bloodstream. And this causes inflammation that disrupts how the body processes food. And this inflammation can lead to weight gain, obesity, ties in with intestinal permeability or leaky gut, and affects hormone regulation and appetite control. So I know that's a very complex explanation, and I completely break it down in my podcast episode, Flare Down, Slim Down, Conquering Inflammation for Lasting Weight Loss is what it's called. And again, I'll link to that in the show notes. The long and short of what this means is that inflammation from the SIBO actually ends up affecting our appetite control and the hormones that help us signal hunger and fullness. The next way that SIBO affects weight gain is through bloating and abdominal distension. Feeling bloated and feeling distended from gas can sometimes make you feel like you're gaining weight, even if it's not actually fat. When you feel fat, sometimes it can actually affect your overall calorie intake and contribute to weight gain. Sometimes when people don't feel good, they're not eating as often because they feel bloated. Maybe they're choosing less healthy foods because they feel bloated and they're trying not to cause a lot of gas production. So the bloating itself sometimes can be a factor. And then the last thing, but not least, is constipation. So with methane producing SIBO, which is a subtype of SIBO, constipation can occur. So basically the methane gas that's produced slows down digestion, causing food to stay in the gut longer, and that gives your body more opportunity to absorb every last calorie. So those are the many different ways that SIBO can contribute to weight gain. So you can see why it's such a big problem with people who have SIBO. And I hear it all the time with my clients. A lot of times people will say, I've gained however many pounds in the past year and I didn't change anything. And in fact, I'm trying to eat healthier, I'm exercising more, and I'm still gaining weight. And when they have SIBO, that makes a lot of sense. Some people on the flip side do experience weight loss, and that can happen in a few different ways. So it can just be the flip side of the malabsorption. So as I mentioned earlier, malabsorption of nutrients can lead to weight gain because the body tries to compensate for not getting enough nutrients by increasing your appetite. However, for some individuals, the same malabsorption results in weight loss. So that makes sense too, right? I think for me, the way I think of it is it goes back to some people, their body's better at conserving calories. So maybe in a famine, they would survive because they do really well on really low calories. And those are the people that tend to be more overweight. And then some people, their body is just less efficient, meaning they will burn off the calories and they tend more toward being thin. So whether your body decides to compensate with increased appetite and whether that effectively causes weight gain or whether your body just succumbs to the malabsorption and loses weight, everybody's different. Another way that SIBO can contribute to weight loss is through increased energy expenditure. Some studies suggest that SIBO can increase your body's energy output. The body works harder to manage the bacterial imbalance and cope with inefficient digestion, which can contribute to weight loss. Another way is through altered gut motility. SIBO can impact gut motility, causing symptoms like diarrhea or just frequent bowel movements. And when you have more frequent bowel movements or diarrhea, it can prevent the body from absorbing as many nutrients, leading to weight loss. So the flip side of the constipation thing, whereas constipation, when someone has especially the methane type, the digestion will be slowed down and they'll have more opportunity to absorb those nutrients. Whereas if the motility is faster, the food's moving through faster, they have less opportunity to absorb the nutrients, and that can lead to weight loss. And then the last way that SIBO can contribute to weight loss is through disruption of appetite. So again, the bacterial overgrowth and inflammation disrupt hormones that control appetite, and that for some people can lead to reduced hunger and food intake. So let's break down the 3 different subtypes of SIBO and talk about how each subtype affects weight. SIBO manifests in 3 main forms, and they're characterized by the type of gas produced, which is either hydrogen, methane, or hydrogen sulfide. And each subtype has distinct effects on digestion and body weight, making it important to understand these differences for effectively managing SIBO and addressing SIBO. And diagnosis of SIBO typically involves a breath test where the levels of these gases in your breath are measured to determine the specific type of SIBO you have. So the first type, hydrogen dominant SIBO, generally this is characterized with hydrogen dominant SIBO, bacteria produce hydrogen gas, and this generally speeds up food movement through the gut, causing diarrhea. This rapid transit time can lead to malabsorption of nutrients and weight loss, as the body doesn't have time to absorb sufficient nutrients and calories. So hydrogen type is the type that'll typically be associated with weight loss because you're just losing everything through the diarrhea. Symptoms of hydrogen type usually involve diarrhea. And I say generally because these things don't always manifest how we would expect, because our gut is complex and there can be other factors that are kind of pulling things the opposite way. But in general, we do see this. So symptoms of hydrogen type SIBO include diarrhea, urgency to use the bathroom, not having a lot of time to get there, bloating, and fatigue. And often food poisoning is the initial trigger of this particular subtype. Just an interesting side note. Methane dominant SIBO. The characteristics of this, in general, what happens is the bacteria, or actually the archaea organisms that are overgrown, produce methane gas, which slows gut transit time and causes constipation. The slower digestion allows for more time for calorie and nutrient absorption, which can contribute to weight gain. And this subtype is now referred to as IMO, IMO, for intestinal methanogen overgrowth. So we'll see this gas kind of elevated all throughout the intestine, not just in the small intestine. It's a slight nuanced change in the definition. As far as the practical application of identifying and managing it, it's still exactly the same as far as how we would evaluate and address the SIBO. And this is linked to chronic constipation, this methane type, bloating, burping, and sometimes even acid reflux, headaches, fatigue, and brain fog. Methane slows gut motility, and that's how it can actually affect. I do really commonly see the acid reflux, burping, and even nausea with methane SIBO because, as I mentioned, we see this all throughout the intestine. So we'll see slowed motility in the large intestine, which causes constipation, and we'll see motility slow all the way through the small intestine and even up to the stomach emptying. And when the stomach is slow to empty, we see nausea, we see acid reflux, and we can see belching. The third type is hydrogen sulfide SIBO. This is less common, but I do see it all the time. I have plenty of podcast episodes that are interviews with some of my patients who were able to overcome and conquer hydrogen sulfide SIBO, because this subtype is more commonly underdiagnosed, harder to diagnose historically, and it's kind of nastier than the other two subtypes in the sense that people can feel much, much sicker. And so this subtype is often associated with diarrhea, although it can be associated with constipation. It really depends on where the hydrogen sulfide producers are overgrown. The small intestine will typically result in diarrhea. We can have an overgrowth of sulfide producers in the large intestine, which will typically cause constipation. But in general, since we're talking about SIBO, diarrhea is what we see for sure. And we also see bloating, abdominal pain. There can be a rotten egg smell to the gas, although not always. And people with hydrogen sulfide SIBO tend to have more whole body symptoms because the body is having difficulty detoxifying all this sulfur. So we see a lot of like fatigue, joint pain, severe brain fog, kind of just overall malaise that we see. And often another thing I see is maybe bladder or chronic UTIs is something just that I've noticed clinically, because we do know that the type of bacteria that are involved in hydrogen sulfide SIBO are the same type that are involved in urinary tract infections. So I think there's some crossover there, and I've definitely seen that. These are just some things I'm mentioning because these can be clues to potentially explore this further. And the impact on weight can vary with hydrogen sulfide SIBO, but in general, the inflammation and oxidative stress caused by the hydrogen sulfide can disrupt our metabolic processes. So it can either lead to weight loss or gain, just depending on the individual circumstance. And so I do recommend getting tested if you're not sure what type you have so that you know which way to go. Now let's talk next about diet. Dietary strategies for managing SIBO symptoms. Diet does play a critical role in managing the SIBO symptoms and especially the impact on weight. While some eating habits can worsen SIBO symptoms and contribute to weight changes, a personalized diet is the best approach that's tailored to the person to soothe symptoms and also help manage weight. There are a few different dietary approaches, and I'll go through my 3 go-tos for this. The first line diet approach would be kind of cleaning up your diet. So I wouldn't jump to any of these special SIBO diets if your diet is really, really poor. If your diet's really, really poor, clean it up, go to more natural whole foods, cut way back on the sugar. If you have lots of sugar, cut the high fructose corn syrup out of your diet, cut the fried food out of your diet, get more fruits and veggies. I would first do that, but let's assume your diet's not that bad. My next recommendation would be a low FODMAP diet. And again, this is to help with weight and control the symptom, calm down the actual symptoms of SIBO. The low FODMAP diet was developed by Monash University in Australia, and it focuses on reducing short chain carbohydrates, FODMAPs, that are poorly absorbed in the small intestine. These are the carbohydrates that when you eat them, the bacteria in the small intestine, in the case of SIBO, ferments them, and this is how we get the bloating and the gas and the abdominal pain. And while limiting high FODMAP foods can alleviate SIBO symptoms and stabilize weight, it is important to understand that this diet is not a long-term solution or a one-size-fits-all approach. The low FODMAP diet is intended as a phased process to identify individual food triggers, as what affects one person is different from what may affect another. So we do see the low FODMAP diet process is meant to be a series of a staged approach that starts with elimination and then continues to reintroduction and then finishes off with personalization. So just some examples of some low FODMAP foods would be things like berries, citrus fruits, spinach, carrots, rice, oats, lean proteins, and lactose-free dairy. If you want to learn more about the low FODMAP diet and how it can help you feel better, I do have an article about this that I will link to in the show notes called What is the Low FODMAP Diet and How Can It Help Me Feel Better? That is probably my number one go-to. There's another approach though that is very commonly used, and it's called the specific carbohydrate diet. And it's designed to eliminate complex carbohydrates and certain sugars that are difficult to digest and may contribute to gut dysbiosis or imbalance of bacteria. Unlike the low FODMAP diet, which focuses on reducing short chain carbohydrates, the specific carbohydrate diet, or the SCD, it'll be called, targets a broader range of carbohydrates. It also excludes all grains, starchy vegetables, and processed foods. It emphasizes simple, whole foods such as fresh fruits, non-starchy vegetables, lean meats, and nuts. Avoiding foods that can ferment and cause inflammation, the specific carbohydrate diet aims to reduce gut inflammation, support healing, and restore gut balance, alleviating SIBO symptoms. The low FODMAP diet is based more on really focusing in on the fermentable carbohydrates, whereas the specific carbohydrate diet pulls out just carbohydrates. And either approach can be helpful. Everybody's, again, different as far as what's going to help each person the most. And I think there's also something to be said for which diet appeals to you more. If the idea of cutting out all carbs feels like a death sentence, then start with the low FODMAP diet, because that one allows certain types of carbs. It'll allow rice, it'll allow potatoes, it just won't allow wheat and beans. So with that, you get some carbs. And on the other hand, if you feel like maybe the low FODMAP diet is too restrictive in foods that you really enjoy, so maybe certain fruits and vegetables that you really love, maybe it would be more appealing for you to try the specific carbohydrate diet and focus on just cutting out the carbs, and that way you can have any of the fruits and vegetables you like. And then the third option actually is a combination of the two. So the third option for diet, it's called the SIBO specific diet, popularized by Alyssa Seebecker, one of our SIBO experts of the world. And this is a combination of the low FODMAP and SIBO specific. So as you can imagine, combining two diets together, it's more restrictive than either of them by themselves. So I reserve this one for people who are just not responding well to the low FODMAP. So the low FODMAP is typically my go-to to start out with for people. And when people aren't doing well with it, which can happen in cases of really severe overgrowth, that maybe it's not enough to really calm your symptoms down as much as you would like, then we'll move to the SIBO specific diet, which limits high FODMAP foods and complex carbohydrates. And it can be very effective. So this one is very effective for managing SIBO symptoms. The downside to that is it's also more challenging to follow because it's so restrictive. So many people find significant relief with the low FODMAP diet, and they don't need to advance to the SIBO specific diet. But it's nice to have choices, and it's nice to have steps, and it's nice to have alternatives. So that's the lowdown on the 3 dietary strategies that I would recommend considering. Now, as far as weight loss, so let's talk about dietary strategies to lose weight with SIBO. Losing weight can be a little tricky, but adjusting your diet can make a tremendous difference. Studies show that improving gut health with the right foods helps reduce inflammation and supports better digestion. So that's the underlying thing we want to do. So it's going to boil down to, you want to find out if you have SIBO and clear the SIBO, because once you can calm that inflammation, and once you can get the motility straightened out, once you can improve your nutrient absorption, all those things we discussed earlier on about the different causes of weight gain when you have SIBO, it kind of resolves all those underlying issues. So you go back to absorbing normally, you go back to digesting normally, your metabolic processes, your hunger and fullness cues go back to normal. I do see this in clinical practice, where once we clear the bacteria, suddenly the weight starts to come off. So it's really amazing. But you don't have to wait until you're at that endpoint to start seeing progress. So let's talk about what you can start right away, even if you have full-blown SIBO right now. First of all, we want to look at optimizing a few different things. Number one is meal patterns. Balancing out your meal patterns. So combining a protein source with a carbohydrate, such as a grain product or a fruit, will help to regulate your blood sugar and insulin levels, and that will help support weight loss. And with that, I would add in a low FODMAP vegetable so that you have some fiber intake with it. So the balance of your plate with the protein, carb and the vegetable is going to help maintain those insulin levels and help with weight loss. The next thing is portion control and meal timing. So you do want to eat smaller amounts more frequently. That can be meals or snacks. And both should be balanced in the way I just explained. Now, maybe with snacks, you just have a protein and a carbohydrate, but you don't just want to snack on carbs and you don't just want to snack on protein. The balance together gives you a really nice synergistic effect that is beneficial for your insulin levels and energy and appetite control. Also, eating smaller, more frequent meals helps to manage symptoms like bloating and discomfort so that the gut doesn't get so overloaded. And it also helps to stabilize blood sugar levels because you're not eating so much at once, so your blood sugars don't spike as much. And then I would recommend for timing having something every 4 hours or so. That way you're not going long periods between meals. So it just helps to, again, regulate appetite. And then the next thing I would recommend is eating mindfully. This is a really cool way to help manage your weight. And it's also critically important for optimal digestion. So pay attention to how you feel when you eat and how different foods affect your body. Pay attention to your hunger and fullness cues. Eat until you're no longer hungry, but don't eat until you feel full, because the brain will have a lag time in telling your stomach that you feel full. And so usually if you eat until you're no longer hungry and wait 20 minutes before you decide to have anything else, you'll realize that you're actually satisfied on less food. And some other things like eating slowly, savoring each bite, noticing the sensations, the flavors, the textures, really helps you experience your meal more so that you feel satisfied with a smaller amount. And it also helps support digestion because as you're experiencing the food, the brain is experiencing it and therefore sending the right signals to the digestive organs to digest your food. So mindful eating not only helps manage the SIBO, but it also helps with the weight control. And it helps with your relationship with food, because we really need to think about food in a more positive way. We tend to see food as the enemy, which makes sense when it's causing you discomfort and pain and misery. And it feels like the food is the problem because you eat and that's when you get the symptoms. But when we find what foods work well with our body and when we address what's out of balance with our body, we realize the food was never the problem. And so we just do need to take care of our relationship with food, because eating is supposed to be an enjoyable thing, and we can get you back to where that's the case. Hydration, adequate hydration is also essential for digestive health. So don't forget that. And especially if you're having diarrhea or constipation, hydration becomes critically important. If you have diarrhea, you're losing fluid and electrolytes. If you have constipation, you need enough fluid and electrolytes to help you soften the stool enough for it to pass. So proper hydration also helps you detoxify. So if you're in the process of clearing SIBO, you need to make sure you're detoxifying and you're drinking plenty of water. Now, let's talk about healing SIBO. As far as healing SIBO, I'm just going to touch on this briefly because I have lots of other resources about this. The standard medical approach to treating SIBO will rely on a single or repeated course of antibiotics with a relapse rate of up to 45% within 9 months. So in this sense, functional nutrition offers a more comprehensive solution that lasts. With functional nutrition, we look at addressing the root cause through the 5R approach, which is to remove the insult, which is either food or food triggers or bacterial overgrowth. We replace either nutrients or enzymes that are needed. And then once that's done, we reinoculate the gut, we repair the intestinal lining, and we reintroduce foods. So in this way, and then I'll just add that alongside that, we address what are your root causes or what are the different factors in your health or health history that predisposed you to getting SIBO in the first place. And we address as many of those as we potentially can so that you have a long-term maintenance plan to prevent SIBO recurrence. So this is a much more holistic, comprehensive approach. And this is how we can get back to eating a much wider variety of foods so that the diet is not the end all be all. So I do have a detailed article on this functional nutrition and how it is essential for IBS and SIBO, and I will link to that in the show notes. So let's get back to talking about how to lose weight with SIBO, but that's important to understand because addressing the SIBO and clearing the SIBO is ultimately how you're going to lose weight on SIBO. So we need a strategic approach that goes beyond just traditional dieting because SIBO can disrupt your metabolism. The first thing is to resolve the SIBO and reduce the inflammation. The inflammation is hindering your weight loss and can worsen metabolic issues. To complement this, you can also add in anti-inflammatory foods like whole foods, fruits and vegetables, and omega-3s, and make sure you're avoiding processed foods, sugars, and refined carbs. We also want to make sure that we're addressing nutritional deficiencies. As I mentioned earlier, SIBO can lead to nutritional deficiencies that affect metabolism and weight regulation. So we want to identify any of these that we may have by working with a healthcare provider or nutritionist and prioritize nutrient-dense foods that are high in vitamins and minerals and antioxidants to support metabolic function. The next thing we want to do, and this is all part of the 5R process, we heal and seal the gut. But some things you can do to support this is incorporate gut healing foods. So once you have cleared the SIBO, something like bone broth, collagen-rich foods can help, or glutamine-containing supplements can help to heal that gut lining and promote repair. Fermented foods can be really great at this point too. And I'm saying after because we can't heal and seal the gut as long as we have the active overgrowth, because it's like we have inflammation, dumping fuel on the fire, and these healing suggestions I'm giving you here would be just like splashing water on that same fire. It's not going to do very much while we're still dumping fuel on the fire. But once you have cleared the SIBO, that's when things like bone broth, collagen, glutamine can really help. Fermented foods. I'll also add a lot of the things I'm listing here before we've cleared the SIBO can actually aggravate the SIBO. So that's another reason to wait on these. But once you're ready, fermented foods are things like sauerkraut, kefir, kimchi, kombucha, and also things like probiotics that will help to reinoculate our gut. And of course, we want to support the gut-brain axis. And so chronic stress and emotional strain can worsen digestive issues. They can make it harder to manage SIBO and control weight. So we also want to incorporate stress reduction techniques like mindfulness, meditation, gentle exercise, diaphragmatic breathing, and that will help us maintain a balanced gut-brain axis, which is critical for sustaining weight results. Because another thing with weight, when we have a lot of stress, we produce more cortisol, so that can affect our hormones and how our hormones can cause us to hold on to weight. So ultimately, a tailored approach that's tailored to your individual needs is essential. And I recommend working with a healthcare provider or dietitian who's knowledgeable with SIBO, who can develop a personalized plan that addresses your specific symptoms, nutritional requirements, and lifestyle factors. And I'll put a link in the show notes if you would like to chat with me about that, or you can always obviously look for somebody in your area as well. Wrapping it up, you guys, managing weight loss with SIBO can be complex indeed, because treating SIBO and getting rid of SIBO for good can be complex, but it's definitely possible. And our best solutions are often natural in this area. And when it comes to weight loss, though, I would encourage you to implement some of these things, because although we do ultimately want to clear the SIBO and calm inflammation down, that doesn't mean we have to wait to get our ducks in a row and start supporting metabolism and start supporting our body to lose weight in some of the more basic, fundamental, natural ways. And the things I listed today are the things that I think people overlook, because a lot of times people are just thinking about restriction. Let me eat less. Let me intermittent fast. Let me eat fewer times in a day. Let me have long periods between meals. And a lot of times that's actually moving things in the wrong direction because of everything we discussed today. So definitely catch us for the next episode and look for those resources in the show notes. And I will catch you guys next time.